Hello and welcome to this update on employment law for students who are going to be studying that subject during the academic year of 2019 through to 2020. Now you can obviously get my full employment law course, which covers a whole range of modules, either directly via my Gumroad site or through my own personal website at uklawweekly.com, and I'll make sure to leave links in the description below. The aim of this video though is to make sure that students are up to date with all of the latest trends, whether that's in case law or statute law, so that they can use those cases in exams or coursework, so it makes them look as if they are sort of right on the cutting edge of things as well, which hopefully they will be anyway, but hopefully this video will give a little bit of a boost or a direction in that regard. So let's start with statute law, and the first thing to note is that the national minimum wage has gone up to £8.21 per hour for those who are aged 25 and over. And often in employment law, you are going to be dealing with a lot of statutory monetary figures, whether that's minimum wage or if it's redundancy payments, and these will generally change year on year around the April time. So it is always going to be worth trying to keep an eye out on what the latest figures are, especially if you're answering something like a problem question and you want to be especially precise in your answer. Now the other legislative change is something that has not actually come through yet, but is certainly something that is on the cards for the government. They announced policy in this regard in the summertime around July, and it's likely that something will be happening with this in the next 12 months or so. And this is the attempt to address the use of non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements that have been used in the past to cover up harassment in the workplace. And this is something that definitely comes out of the Me Too movement, where certainly in the UK we saw a lot of examples where women were afraid to come forward and mention about what employers had done to them in terms of sexual harassment in particular, because of a non-disclosure agreement that they had signed with their former employer. Now this is obviously not a good thing, and the government is seeking to address this, and so although there hasn't really been too much movement in this regard at the moment, it is something that will probably come through simply because of public pressure and media pressure arising out of the Me Too movement. Moving on to case law, we have a number of interesting cases that have happened over the last 12 months or so. The first one is pretty obvious, but it's definitely worth mentioning, and this is an employee dismissed before a TUPE transfer, TUPE standing for Transfer of Undertakings and Protection of Employment, and they were dismissed because of difficult working relationship with someone who would become a new director at the new company that they were going to be working for. And so because of the reason behind that dismissal, it was automatically unfair, and so the employee was successful in that particular case. Another interesting case is involving London Underground, and the London Underground were basically using an agency to contract certain members of staff. However, in order to supplement the staff's wages, London Underground paid the agency so that the employees or the contractors would actually have more wages once they went home. The problem in this particular situation was that the agency did not actually pass that money onto the workers themselves, and instead they kept it. And this was obviously problematic. It meant that the workers weren't getting the money, and eventually the agency even went bankrupt. So the question was, what would happen with these contractors? Could they get the money? And the employment tribunal in this particular case, in fact it went to the Court of Appeal, and they said that they were able to get this money and they were able to get it from London Underground because they would have to supplement the wages themselves, even though they had done so previously, but the agency had kept it for themselves. So it was ultimately London Underground who had that responsibility. Another interesting case that sort of came up quite a bit in the media involved Zelda de Groen, and this was it was a finding that there was not discrimination for a teacher to be dismissed by an ultra-orthodox Jewish nursery when she refused to lie about living with her boyfriend. Now, it's an interesting case because she was ultimately successful on other grounds, but this particular piece of discrimination for her refusal to lie is especially interesting in the context of the case, and probably a little bit controversial as well. Essentially, it came down to it being an issue of discrimination by the nursery itself, and the views of the nursery and how they aligned with the views of the employee. So quite an interesting case that's worth reading about, especially if you're doing a piece of coursework in that area. Another type of discrimination case that came up was in Conisbee and Crossley Farms from 2019, and this held that vegetarianism is not a philosophical belief. Again, very interesting to read the decision of the employment tribunal, but essentially it came down to the fact that vegetarianism was not serious enough to constitute a philosophical belief. Finally, in a case involving sexual harassment, a brief massage on an employee's shoulders, which was intended to be encouraging. There was a sexual harassment claim that was brought, but the massaging of the shoulders did not actually amount to harassment in the end. So those are a few different cases involving different areas of employment law. So that, alongside the statute law, are the types of things that are worth looking out for. Remember to keep an eye out on all of the other cases, and you can subscribe to the UK Law Weekly podcast, where we cover a whole range of subjects from employment law through to other subjects, so that you can keep on top of the latest trends. Thanks very much for listening to this, and I'll catch you again soon. Bye!